Hello and welcome to another Design Clips here at W+9. This is Dawn. Today I have a quick how-to video for you. We recently released the Hexagon Gatefold Die, and there is a little trick to cutting it out so that the hexagons meet up and interlock with each other, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. These cards are 4 by 5.5 inches. So I have a sheet of cardstock here. It's 11 inches long by 5.5 inches tall. So I've just taken a standard 8.5 by 11 inch piece of cardstock and cut it at 5.5 inches. Now the die comes with two parts and they are connected by thin metal wires. When you get them, you'll just snip them apart and you're going to place them at either end of the paper with the triangles in the center there facing toward each other. And these triangles serve as a registration point. You'll line them up so that you don't cut your hexagons off-centered and then they won't interlock. So what we have to do is we have to mark the center line of our cardstock. Now mine is 5.5 inches tall, so the center of mine is going to be at 2 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to mark on either side at 2 3/4 of an inch down. Now if I were making, for instance, a 4 by 4 inch card, my center would be 2 inches, and I would be marking this at 2 inches. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little line coming from the outer edge in. I don't have to go very far, just enough that I will be able to line those little triangles that are on the die up with the center of the line. So I'm using my ruler here just to make sure that I've got it lined up, and I'm just going to make a little mark here on either side of the paper. I'm doing it much darker than I would do it typically because I want it to show up on camera. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take each die and we're going to place them at either end. And we're going to line up that triangle, the point on that triangle, with the line. I'm going to use the edge of the die to line up straight with the edge of the paper so that I make sure that it's straight. And if you're working on a grid mat, you could use the lines on your grid mat. And once I've got that centered and lined up straight, I'm going to use a little bit of low-tack tape to hold it in place. And I'm going to repeat the same thing with the other die on the other side. I need the vertical cuts on these dies to be exactly 8 inches apart for this size card. So you could use your mat and measure 8 inches apart, or you could mark your cardstock at 8 inches. But an even easier trick is something that I learned from my good friends Greg and Angie over at Concord and Ninth. And they created a cardstock template for one of their gatefold designs. So 100% credit goes to them. This is ingenious. What I've done is I've cut down a piece of cardstock to 8 inches wide. I'm going to butt the edge of that cardstock up against the cutting blade of the first die. And then I'm going to take the second die and I'm going to slide it right up against the edge of the cardstock on the other side. And you'll feel the die catch and it won't move anymore. And you'll know that it is exactly 8 inches apart. Again, a little low-tack tape will hold this in place. And then once everything is secure, you can just slide that template down and out of the way. If you have an extended platform, you'll be able to die cut this in one pass. However, I'm using the Gemini Junior, so my platform is too short. So I'm going to have to run it through twice. I'm going to line up my die on my platform and I'm going to run it through. I'm going to allow one side of the die to hang outside of the platform, and you'll be able to see it here in a second. You'll see that the second die there it's just hanging outside, and that's fine. And then once this comes out, I will flip the paper and run it through the second time. Like I said, if you have a longer platform, you'll be able to run this through in one pass, but if not, this is a great workaround. So once that's done, you'll see here that we have our two sides to our gatefold card. At this point, you can erase any of your pencil marks that you used for aligning. And again, I've obviously done them a little darker than I would recommend, but I wanted them to show up on camera for you guys. All right, so now we're all set and ready to start scoring so we can fold this. So I'm using the Martha Stewart scoreboard, and mine has score marks every 1/8 of an inch. But I need to score this at 3 7/16 of an inch. So with the solid hexagon up against the edge, I'm going to pull this out 1/16 of an inch. And if you notice in the upper left-hand corner there's a little line and a triangle. That is actually a 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to slide my paper out that 1/16 of an inch, and then I'm going to score my paper at 3.5 inches. So because I've pushed it out a 1/16 of an inch, I'm actually scoring at 3 7/16 of an inch. Now, if you're using your paper trimmer to do your scoring, then you'll just do it at 3 7/16 of an inch. Or if your scoreboard has 1/16 of an inch measurements, then you're fine. But this is a good little hack for the Martha Stewart scoreboard. So I've gone ahead and folded that back, and now that folded side I'm going to push up against the edge again, and I'm going to score at 4 inches. Now, this is going to be the back side or the inside of my card, and remember our card is 5.5 by 4 inches. So this is going to give me that perfect 4 inch in width. I like to bring the center in because remember I had to eyeball that 1/16 of an inch. So on this one I'll bring the center in, and then when I go to reinforce my fold I will start at the center and slide out, and that way I make sure that I'm not getting too much overlappage. Is that a word, overlappage? It is now. So here you can see how the hexagon interlocks with each other. Now this is a great base for a card, but like many of our products, when we design each release, all the products work really well together. So this is our welcome die, which was also released at the same time. Now this is a great standalone die. It has some large sentiment words, but it also has this great hexagon label. And this cuts the outer thinner border and the inside solid hexagon, and it's the exact same dimensions as the hexagon on the front of this gatefold die. So you can use these together to really elevate your design. You can use them separately as well, but together they're even better. Now this die lends itself perfectly to the split design look too. So here I wanted one side to be white and the other side to have a pretty pattern. So I'm just going to use one side of the die to recut from pattern paper. I'll go ahead and tape that in place. I don't have to be careful about how far apart it is or anything like that because I only need that one side. And I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. Now because I used a 6x6 piece of paper, I just have to snip the edges, but this is great because it gives me a little extra wiggle room and I didn't have to worry about having my die completely centered. And you can see here that it lines up perfectly. And I'll adhere this in place using some liquid adhesive. And then I will take this over to my paper trimmer and trim off the excess around all the sides. And that'll give me one side with this really pretty pattern and the other side a solid white. And here are the 3 cards that I created using the Hexagon Gatefold die along with the welcome die. For the first card, I used a plain white card base. Then I die cut the hexagon from the welcome die out of green and out of white. I used the green as the outline, and then I used the solid one in the center. I also added a cute little greenhouse from our welcome die just to complement that green color, and then I stamped congrats on your new home. Both of those are from our new home stamp set. Now for the next card, I decided to go much more colorful, which is way outside of my normal wheelhouse. Here I used a green card base, and all I did was mask off the center on the back side, and then I stamped a polka dot stamp on either front side of the card. For the center, I used a bunch of flowers die cut using our Bountiful Blooms die set, and this is an oldie but goodie. I haven't used it in a long time, and I forgot just how much I loved it. And I also used the thanks, which is one of the sentiments in the welcome die as well. Now here's the one that I showed you where we had the split design. I added that pretty patterned paper to one side, and then I just die cut a thanks and then stamped for your kindness. Thanks is from the welcome die, and then for your kindness is from our welcome wreath stamp set. I love how versatile this die is. It's perfect for your more traditional or fussy cards, but it's also great for those clean and simple modern cards. I hope that you enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas on how to use our new Hexagon Gatefold die. Remember, if you have any questions about any of the supplies used, you can find a link in the description box below to our blog, as well as links to the featured supplies used on today's cards. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!